Our state has some incredible problems. My name is Lynn Hinderrocker. I'm here to talk about that with you and talk about the trends that have shaped this state and dragged us in one direction or another. We're not really we're not realizing the dream we had way back in the early 2000s or even around 2008 or 9 or 10. My name is Lynn Hinderrocker. Welcome to WOWBIZ Nebraska. We're going to get it on right now. What is happening? Those three words have been very popular since the 70s. You know, everybody wants to know what's going on, what's happening, right? This all applies to the business world today, and I'm going to talk to you for a good 14, 15 minutes here today about what is really happening and how it affects demand for your product and your ability to recruit talent. My name is Lynn Hinderrocker. Thanks for joining me here on WOWBIZ Nebraska. We're going to talk about trends. Now, ever since 1997, I'm almost embarrassed to admit this, I have been tracking, synopsizing, reading, researching trends in the broadest sense, by the way, that are shaping demand for your product, your brand, your industry, and also, of course, many, many others. And they all begin to flow together over time when you begin to, I think I now have a 467-page document called Trend Tracks. I'm going to talk to you today, and I'm just actually going to dip right into the book or the document. I'm going to pull out 6 trends that don't necessarily have anything at all to do with each other, but I have to tell you, when somebody sits down with me or other people that are consultants or advisors, maybe marketing people and so on, and say, you know, how do we increase demand for our product? How do we sell more products? Many times the answer has to do with broadening their perspective on the consumer, obviously, and the things that are influencing the consumer, and how the world is changing, right? And so many times these people are so busy, they're busy owners, you know, and they're very focused on operations on a daily basis, and they really don't just have the time to think about the breadth and how the world is rapidly, probably more rapidly than they realize, evolving and changing. It's almost like going to a play at a theater and you watch the various sets, you know, and the backdrop changes as the set changes or as the plot changes. But the actors so often are still standing there repeating the same words, right? The same narrative or same script, even though the backdrop on the stage has changed. This is a very apt metaphor for how many businesses are running their companies today. So I'm going to try to sensitize you to just a few trends here today so that you can think twice and say, maybe we need to be rethinking our value proposition or how we communicate with people and so on. Now, the first trend, this has been going on now for many years, by the way, but it increases in its intensity and its velocity, and that is big companies are outsourcing work to small companies and then buying those companies as they look attractive, as they get larger themselves. Now, outsourcing various parts of your company, various parts of your operation, this has been discussed many years. In fact, back in 1999, Tom Peters, I believe, was one of the first people to come out and say, outsource everything. Outsource everything. Sarah Lee down in St. Louis was doing this. Other than administrative core and some of the brand values, all the production, distribution, all the operations, even the finance was being outsourced to various small companies. And then they would absorb those companies back into the company. Again, I'm talking about Sarah Lee in St. Louis, but this is true many, many different industries. So I want you to think for a second, if you were to be selling your product to a big company, say, hey, why don't you outsource this function to us? We're really good at that. And over time, we'll attract other companies that are non-competitive doing the same kind of thing. And then at a certain point, you may want to consider buying us, weaving us right into the core of your operation. Very interesting idea, how we go loose tight, right? Loose tight. We'll push things out, and then at a certain point, we want them in, we want them brought in close. It's a very interesting trend. All right, I'm going to skip to a completely different trend at this point. This is a consumer trend. This is a heart and soul trend. This is when somebody reaches across the table and says to me, they say, Lynn, how do people really feel these days? I don't think I really understand how people are thinking about the world and themselves and so on. Can you give me some insight into that? And I'm so glad that that question does come up fairly regularly. I want to answer that question for you today. And this is trend number 2, right? I'm going to quote it right here. we want to believe that we all belong to a bigger American story and about how essential that belief is to the maintenance of a capitalist regime. These are these words right here out of this quote, a capitalist regime that maximizes our labor and diminishes our lives. Think about that. Those are harsh words, and yet they actually are how millions of people now think about the United States and the so-called American dream. A lot of them feel like everything is being monetized. It's all about how much money I can make, how much I can produce for an employer, so on and so forth. And the actual quality of being a human being in our society today is steadily going down for some strange reason. It has an interesting causation with capitalism and with our obsession with more productivity, more money, and so on. It's a very interesting thing, and it does penetrate your culture, right? And it inculcates, what should I say, cynicism. In fact, let's go deeper into this and talk about millennials who embrace this frightening idea, this worrisome idea, probably more overtly than everybody else. I'm going to read it right here. It says, the typical millennial awakens many mornings to discover that some new pillar of the world order has crumbled overnight. Right? And while he or she is afforded very, very little power to do anything about it, I'm reading here one of the pieces that I put together. Society has outfitted her with the ability to express her frustration. Of course, we're talking now about social media, right? So there's a lot of young people today that feel like they are caught and they don't see any way out. Right? They don't see any way out of the situation that they are in. They're overeducated in a way, but underfunded, underpaid, so on. And they owe $29,000 to their college tuition, right? So they've got to figure out some way to pay that off along the way. It's a very challenging situation for them. And that's why the hashtag burn it all down is trending very, very high, that particular phrase. If you can believe that, by the way, think about that for just a minute, the frustration that comes out at that point, all right? So these are like social and cultural trends that if you're trying to sell a product or service to these kinds of people, you definitely want to be aware of these. Now, by the way, Procter & Gamble, let's talk about Gillette, which is owned by Procter & Gamble. They're doing something very interesting to offset this general idea, all right? They are showing ads, of course, that show they want to be socially correct. See, they don't want to be part of this, well, the machine is grinding away at me and pulling me down. They don't want to be part of that. So they're showing now a transgender individual, right, shaving with Gillette equipment or apparatus or whatever. Now, some people, millions of people think this is fantastic, it's great, it's kind of a breakthrough. There are other people, millions, that feel they're being manipulated and they're making too big of a deal about it and so on and so forth. Now, this is where we are at, right, today in our society. There's a division about this kind of topic, but marketers are watching carefully. They want to be relevant. They want to be relevant, right? And this is really the question you want to ask yourself. Are we relevant? Is our brand relevant? Are we really relevant to the people who are going to be buying our product the next 10 or 20 years? I think Procter & Gamble said, you know, these are going to be younger people. We've got to cultivate this market. They're more progressive in this area, so we're going to go ahead and do this, realizing it's going to be somewhat edgy, somewhat provocative, somewhat controversial. So all this trend stuff is actually very relevant and is driving the allocation of millions of dollars in marketing and, of course, lots of other things as well. Now, let's talk about the web, all right? We all know that it's a massive force in our marketplace, and it's going to continue to be so. Internet connectivity is a symbol. It actually leads to other things, which then lead to other things. Internet connectivity is linked to mental connectivity, right? Mental connectivity is like intuition and synchronicity, and then all of that, as we go here and we go there, and what about this, and I should check out that, and so on and so forth. And so it takes us towards emotional connectivity. So I just want to reiterate that again. Internet connectivity leads to mental or intellectual connectivity, which then leads to emotional connectivity, which is really spirituality. So You thought you understood what the web was about, but really I have to tell you, it's about something even bigger than what you're envisioning. So very interesting correlation, very interesting pattern there that goes deeper and deeper inside of us as we utilize the web. Now let's go back to the marketplace for a second and talk about the importance of fashion. Drug companies and pharmaceutical firms, especially those having to do with herbs and those kinds of homeopathic products, are now borrowing interest from stars, actresses, fashion people, sometimes very kind of beneath ground fashion people. And really trying to imbue their product with an edge, kind of a fashionable look, to separate themselves from the pack. So when people say, well, I don't even understand who that person is, and why are they selling these herbs or different things and these antidotes and healing agents or whatever, well, I don't understand. This is all about fashion. We are in a world, an Instagram society, of course, and so fashion and first impressions and how people look, all that kind of celebrity persona, extremely important in terms of setting aside. And this is how, by the way, this is how fringe products come in from the fringe into the mainstream. All right, so there's an awful lot going on out there today. And finally, I just want to throw one more trend attitude out at you, just one more little thought. This has to do with leadership and management, which is always a struggle inside of a company, what they really are and who's a leader and who's not a leader. But we got today's top management mantra is to enhance, this is good, this is so good, to enhance intellectual capital by managing human relationships. Let me just say that one more time. To enhance intellectual capital, assets, right, by managing human relationships. You know, this is so amazing. This is an amazing idea. And it leads to the notion of CEOs or business owners, not just as managers, but as motivators, as coaches, as philosophers, as super shrinks, so to speak, as even a media symbol, maybe even a talk show host, right? So think about it for just a second, the notion of leadership, human relationships, intellectual assets. What do we really know that is bankable? That's what it all leads to. It's a new definition of what leadership is really all about. We've come to the end of our first half of WOWBIZ Nebraska. I'm Lynn Hinderrocker. Thank you so much for sticking with me all the way through this show. It's interesting, so interesting to talk about trends. And if you want to deepen your impact on your prospects or the industry that you're in, stay on top of trends. Talk about them and see what people around you have to say.